Hey everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of the Federalist Papers. We were dealing with James Madison and Alexander Hamilton's essays. Let's continue. The design was also conceived of establishing a general tax to be administered by the federal authority. This also had its adversaries and failed. This unhappy people seemed to be now suffering from popular convulsions, from dissensions among the states, and from the actual invasion of foreign arms. The crisis of their destiny. So look at that. All those problems with the country. Popular convulsions, so they got, just movements bouncing about, causing problems. Dissensions among the states, so they're not getting along, feuding. And then literal soldiers coming in and then, causing more chaos. So those waves, one after another, can bring the most mighty empires down. All nations have their eyes fixed on the awful spectacle. So people like in other countries watching like, whoa, what's going on? And they're just kind of like watching it like, whoa, like it's a movie, right? The first wish prompted by humanity is that this severe trial may issue in such a revolution of their government as will establish their union and render it the parent of tranquility. So he's letting us know that some people, when they do a revolution, they want to it's because their government isn't making life well. Their hope is to change it, get someone in there who will bring about peace. That's the hope. Tranquility, freedom, and happiness. The next, that the asylum under which we trust, the enjoyment of these blessings, will speedily be secured in this country, may receive and console them for the catastrophe of their own. So notice that. So our land is supposed to be like an asylum for us, tranquil, order, protections from domestic issues and foreign issues. And you have your own life to deal with. You don't need your state also causing you additional problems. So he put it in a very beautiful way. I make no apology for having dwelt so long on the contemplation of these federal precedents. Experience is the oracle of truth, and where its response are unequivocal, they ought to be conclusive and sacred. What's cool about this experience, the oracle of truth, is that if you don't get that reference, in Greece they used to have the virgin oracles of Delphi, and they used to get the women drunk on these weird stuff and like different herbs, and she would mumble something stupid and they would think that it was the god speaking through this temple virgin lady priestess, and people would travel all around the Greek Isles to get to the oracle at Delphi. You can still see the ruins on many pictures. You can see the ruins on many maps and stuff. But here he's like saying the opposite. They're like, hey, no, experience can tell you a lot more than some drugged up virgin sitting in a temple all day. And where its response are unequivocal, they ought to be conclusive and sacred. The important truth, which it unequivocally pronounces, in the present case, is that a sovereignty over sovereigns, a government over governments, a legislation for communities, as contradistinguished from individuals, as it is a solemn in theory, so in practice it is subversive of the order and ends of civil polity. The order and ends of civil polity. He's so great at writing. By substituting violence in place of the mild and salutary coercion of the magistracy. Mild, salutary coercion. Publius. Alright, that was the end of their essay 20. Okay, so those through like 15 through all the way through 20, all were dealing with the insufficiency of a confederacy to preserve the union. And then they talked about essentially how even if you have these groups who go into a confederacy, they're all broken up, they all have their own interests. One will eventually be the stronger one in the group who will then take over, right? So they still suffer from the same problems. And because they're all divided, they'll be able to be picked off, structurally by a bigger, larger, unified force. So they got into all those details. They gave us examples from Homer. It was quite brilliant. It's a great book. Now we're in a new essay, but this one is just by Alexander Hamilton, okay? Number 21, Other Defects of the Present Confederation. So now remember, the Confederation splits up everything into factions and separate. It almost makes us tribes again, essentially. So the Native Americans had the 5 tribes. The Iroquois Confederacy didn't do so good. Confederacies just don't do that well. And here in this time period, they're trying to unify people to have the spirit to endure what it's going to take to stave off the British, right? Having in the 3 last numbers taken a summary review of the principal circumstances and events which depict the genius and fate of other Confederate governments, I shall now proceed in the enumeration of the most important of these defects, which have hitherto disappointed our hopes from the system established among ourselves. So, defects. So he's going to let us know what needs to be fixed in the system they're bringing about, to form a safe and satisfactory judgment of the proper remedy. It is absolutely necessary that we should be well acquainted with the extent and malignity of the disease. Okay, so that's a good example. So even a doctor, they need to know about the diseases in all aspects. You need to know how it started, how you're going to cure it, what its symptoms are, blah blah blah, how do you stop it from spreading, blah blah, right? Here he's talks about it, the system of government almost in the same way, in order to stop tyranny and allow liberty, happiness, and such to reign. These are the things they're contending you must watch out for, and further, things that you have to watch out for in a confederacy. The next most palpable defect of the existing confederation is the total want of a sanction to its laws. That's an important note. So how do you really get the Confederates to obey the laws that you put between them if there's not a, bigger, more powerful structure above them? Let's think about it. The United States, as now composed, have no power to exact obedience. So notice this. Power to exact obedience, right? Remember how they mentioned in the other one? The stronger one in the group will flex what its wants upon the smaller Confederates, or punish disobedience to their resolutions, either by a pecuniary mulct, by a suspension or divestiture of privileges, or by any other constitutional means. Suspension and, dismissing of privileges. There is no express delegation of authority to them to use force against delinquent members. How can they use force if, they don't really have the might behind them? Unless, you see, I get it. Oh, well, if one goes around, the 4 will go, but the 4, if they're not strong enough as that 1, will it make a difference? And if such a right should be ascribed to the federal head, as resulting from the nature of the social compact between the states. Aha! The social compact between the states. The social compact between states. That's an important thing. It must be inference and construction in the face of that part of the second article, by which it is declared that each state shall retain every power, jurisdiction, and right, not expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled. Expressly delegated. The want of such a right involves, no doubt, a striking absurdity, but we are reduced to the dilemma either of supposing the deficiency preposterous as it may seem, or of contravening or explaining away a provision. Aha! Contravening or explaining away a provision, which has been of late repeated theme of the eulogies of those who oppose the new Constitution. He said eulogies. He said eulogies. And the omission of which is that plan has been the subject of much plausible animadversion and severe criticism. If we are unwilling to impair the force of this applauded provision, we shall be obliged to conclude that the United States afford the extraordinary spectacle of a government destitute even of the shadow of constitutional power to enforce the execution of its own laws. That's horrible. That'd be terrible, right? So if you're unwilling to force the provisions, well, by nature then, you're just going to have a shadow power. Shadow constitutional power. It has no power. Like, your shadow, ain't got no power. It's not going to do anything. A phantom, right? It's just not real. It will appear from the specimens which have been cited that the American Confederacy, in this particular strand, discriminated from every other institution of a similar kind, and exhibits a new, unexampled phenomenon in the political world. Unexampled phenomenon, he says, that America was an uncommon way, a new thing, a new way of living, he contends. Very important.